Well, my family, my mom and dad, moved to Hanford in 1947. When my dad got out of the Navy, they came back from Pearl Harbor, where my dad was in the military, in the Navy. And they started in '47 at Hanford, and my brother was born shortly thereafter. And he's one of the many infants who died shortly after birth in what is now known to be the Hanford Downwinder area. There were a lot of children, and children just born, who died. We're not sure exactly why, and there's a study that was ongoing by the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry to try to find out whether that increase in death, neonatal death, and increase in preterm births was related to the radioiodine that's now known to have been released during those years. There's also a fairly high peak of radioiodine that was released in the early '50s that most people don't know about. They think that the 1945 peak of radioiodine was the highest peak, but it's now known there were some fairly elevated amounts of radioiodine released in the early '50s, which correlates with a peak in preterm birth during that time. So my brother died in 1947, and I was born in the end of 1950. I was conceived and born in Cadleck Hospital in Richland and was raised in Richland. My dad became a nuclear engineer. He was originally an electrical engineer trained at UC Berkeley, and then went to MIT and became a nuclear engineer. He was actually a safety engineer, ironically. And we lived there in an F house. The whole city was a government-owned city until the mid-'50s, when they finally allowed people to buy houses. Richland was the quote-unquote white-collar community, and then there was Kennewick and Pasco. But in our neighborhood, almost everyone was a pathologist. Almost all the dads were pathologists, chemists, or engineers. And we lived in an F house, and there were B's and A's, and down the street were B's and A's, and on the other side were F's. Everything was in a straight line grid. It's a very organized city. It had the appearance of a safe and calm kind of utopia in the desert, with newly planted trees and newly planted lawns, picket fences. Everything just looked, I guess, what the ideal for the 1950s. It was a kind of an odd city, though, because there were strange names like the Atomic Laundry. The Richland Bombers was the high school team, and they still are called the Richland Bombers. But when I grew up, I didn't know that there was anything abnormal about the city. And the reactors were north of town, straight out Stevens Drive. I lived on Stevens, and my dad would just head straight out Stevens Drive every day and get on a bus and go out to the facility. I went to Sacagawea Elementary School, which is just kitty corner from where I lived. And all the kids there were developing Tennessee accents because there were lots of teachers that had come in from Oak Ridge. They did a lot of interchange between Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where there was a sister-type plant, part of the Manhattan Project, to Hanford. So all of us were developing Tennessee accents, and our mothers would have to redirect our speech patterns when we got home.